Jordan Peterson saying that he acts as if God exists. I've been really busy lately, and I've been wanting to do a second part to the Peterson paradox video, the longer part that explains things in more depth, but I just haven't had time. And of course, in my research, I just found a couple of more books that I really should read before I go further into that. So I have to get through some work before I attempt to make a second part to that video. What you see on the screen is a slide that I'm working on regarding that video. I might go through that at the end of this, but right now I want to focus on the as if thing that Peterson keeps saying, that he acts as if. So what does that really mean? And so I think part of my job, as I've named myself node in a network, trying to embody that and trying to give my network information that I come across. And I think it's essential, because there's a lot of talking heads out there that will give you their opinions, and some of them are very wise and very intelligent, and I'm neither wise nor intelligent, but I do read books, and some things are just too good not to share. And if you're part of my network, if you're a subscriber, you're going to find me sharing a lot of things that I read in books. So this one particular book that I'm going to be sharing a lot with you is The Master and His Emissary by Iain McGilchrist. And the subtitle is The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. So on page 170, he has a really interesting section. It's about a page long, and it's entitled Belief. And so I think I'm just going to read through that and just share it with the rest of my network, since I don't have time to make a really long video that's really intense with the slide making and all that sort of thing. So he starts with, believing is not to be reduced to thinking that such and such might be the case. It is not a weaker form of thinking laced with doubt. Sometimes we speak like this, quote, I believe that the train leaves at 6:13, where I believe that simply means that, quote, I think, but am not certain that. Since the left hemisphere is concerned with what is certain, with knowledge of the facts, its version of belief is that it is just absence of certainty. If the facts were certain, according to its view, I should be able to say, I know that, instead. This view of belief comes from the left hemisphere's disposition towards the world, interest in what is useful, therefore fixed and certain. The train timetable is no good if one can't rely on it. So belief is just a feeble form of knowing, as far as it is concerned. But belief in terms of the right hemisphere is different, because its disposition towards the world is different. The right hemisphere does not know anything in the sense of certain knowledge. For it, belief is a matter of care. It describes a relationship where there is a calling and an answering, the root concept of responsibility. Thus, if I say that I believe in you, it does not mean that I think that such and such things are the case about you, but can't be certain that I'm right. It means that I stand in a certain sort of relation of care towards you that entails me in certain kinds of ways of behaving, acting and being towards you, and entails on you the responsibility of certain ways of acting and being as well. It is an acting as if certain things were true about you that in the nature of things cannot be certain. It has the characteristic right hemisphere qualities of being a betweenness, a reverberative, resonant, responsible, he puts a hyphen in between response and ible, responsible relationship in which each party is altered by the other and by the relationship between the two, whereas the relationship of a believer to the believed in the left hemisphere sense is inert, unidirectional, and centers on control rather than care. I think this is what Wittgenstein was trying to express when he wrote that, quote, my, quote, attitude towards the other is an, quote, attitude towards a soul. I am not of the opinion that he has a soul. An opinion, quote unquote, would be a weak form of knowledge. That is not what is meant by a belief, a disposition, or an attitude. This helps illuminate belief in God. This is not reducible to a question of a factual answer to the question, does God exist, assuming for the moment that the expression, quote, a factual answer, end quote, has a meaning. And just as a side note, that goes back to one of my earliest videos on the Jordan Peterson God question, where I go over Northrop Frye's answering of that, or how that might be answered, or the reasons why Jordan Peterson might answer it in that way. It is having an attitude, holding a disposition toward the world, whereby that world, as it comes into being for me, is one in which God belongs. The belief alters the world, but also alters me. Is it true that God exists? Truth is a disposition, one of being true to someone or something. Another aside. This now is going against the Greek notion of truth, and I'm going to get into that in my next Peterson Paradox video with Heidegger. Truth as aletheia, as unconcealedness and concealedness, which might be very, very foreign to you, but I'm going to explain it in depth in the video. So this truth as disposition, one of being true to someone or something, that's more Hebraic version of truth. And this is where Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris in their first podcast got off the rails. And I think Heidegger, in about 4 pages or less, maybe 4 paragraphs, really sums up that whole debate, and I think succinctly puts Sam Harris in his place in an essay he did on truth and art, which I'm going to cite. Anyway, so back to this. So one cannot believe in nothing and thus avoid belief altogether, simply because one cannot have no disposition towards the world, that being in itself a disposition. Some people choose to believe in materialism. They act as if such a philosophy were true. An answer to the question whether God exists could only come from my acting as if God is, and in this way being true to God, and experiencing God, or not, as the case may be, as true to me. I'm going to read that sentence again because it's a little bit awkward. An answer to the question whether God exists could only come from my acting as if God is, and in this way being true to God and experiencing God, or not, as the case may be, as true to me. If I am a believer, I have to believe in God, and God, if he exists, has to believe in me. This reminds me of the something I was reading in the Epistle to the Romans by Karl Barth. Well, I'll just save it for the Peterson Paradox video, but anyway. Rather like Escher's hands, the belief must arise reciprocally, not by a linear process of reasoning. This acting as if is not a sort of cop-out, an admission that really one does not believe what one pretends to believe. Quite the opposite. As Hans Wehinger understood, all knowledge, particularly scientific knowledge, is no more than an acting as if certain models were true, for the time being true. Truth and belief, once more, as in their etymology, are profoundly connected. It is only the left hemisphere that thinks there is certainty to be found anywhere. Anyway, so I was reading that the other day. I'm rereading this book in preparation for the Peterson Paradox second installment, and I thought I might share that to my network, as a good node would. And if you find that interesting or helpful, you share it with your networks who are interested in Jordan Peterson and why he might use the as-if phrase and explanation for his belief in God. And don't forget to like the video, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Thank you.
Well, there's a guy who's got a little YouTube channel, and I've been sending a lot of people his way, Node in a Network, and he's basically been reading all of the stuff in the footnotes of Maps of Meaning,
where we're all sort of plugged in as like nodes on the network. node in a network. There's a good username.
A node in a network.
The wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network.